All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Human Resources Industry Evening. My name is Heather Hardy and I coordinate our Student Professional Development Program. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping matters. So everybody, as you came in, you did consent to being recorded. Today's presentation will be recorded. We will be sharing it later on YouTube, and you can also be seeing it live on our Facebook channel. As we're going through the presentation, feel free to ask questions. With that said, when you're asking questions, please use the chat box on the bottom and send them to me, Heather Hardy, whenever you have a question. Chris will do his keynote presentation, and following that, we will have some question and answer where I will be reading the questions. Following that, we'll be breaking off into some breakout rooms for networking, and that will then conclude our event. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to our Associate Dean, Kelly Williams-Witt.
Okay, and welcome everyone. I'm Kelly Williams-Witt, and I am the Associate Dean of the Dhillon School of Business and a Professor of Human Resources and Labor Relations. And prior to the current role that I'm in right now, I taught in our HRLR program on the Calgary campus for 17 years. I'd like to start this evening by acknowledging that the University of Lethbridge is located on traditional Blackfoot Confederacy territory. Our university Blackfoot name is Iniskim, meaning Sacred Buffalo Stone. We honor the Blackfoot people and all the Indigenous people who have helped shape and continue to strengthen our university community. During the period of time that I was the HRLR chair, I watched our program and our major evolve and grow into one of the most highly competitive programs in one of the top universities in Canada. So just in case you missed the Maclean's rankings, University of Lethbridge moved up to second place out of 19 universities in Canada in the primarily undergraduate category. So if everybody was in the room, we'd all be clapping. That's really something to celebrate. And we got there through the hard work of our faculty, our staff, and our students who try to really make the Dhillon experience something very special. As many of you know, we've always had a professional development program in Dhillon that's been aimed at providing our students with the extra skills and competencies that'll help them really hit the ground running when they graduate. It's one of the reasons we're here tonight, to connect our students with the community and to show them that the most successful professions are engaged in lifelong learning. Lifelong learning and experiential education are core to the philosophy of the Dhillon School of Business. So I'm very excited to let you know that our student professional development program is evolving. Soon, you're going to hear us start talking a lot more about DSB Link. DSB Link is our new platform supporting professional development and work integrated learning. It'll be our link to the community, connecting local organizations to our academic and lifelong learning programs. We have big plans, and we're very excited to be working even more closely with our partners in Lethbridge and Calgary to create opportunities for all of our stakeholders. HR managers are strategic leaders. They're critical for the successful management of complex and constantly evolving environments, just like the one we're in right now. This evening's an opportunity to celebrate that profession, to listen to an amazing speaker, and to create new connections and reignite old ones. And just in case you also didn't know this, HR is one of the most in-demand occupations in Canada right now. There are over 1,300 job opportunities in Alberta in the last 12 months and over 9,000 opportunities across Canada in the past year. More than half of those job postings request a CPHR designation, which means that our DSB students have a really big advantage. The HRLR major is an accredited program, which means that students are already on their way to the designation when they graduate. So right now, I'd like to turn the stage over to Avi, who will be telling you about CPHR Alberta.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Heather, for inviting me, as well as having the opportunity to speak with the students and the community. For those that don't know, my name is Avi. I'm the External Affairs and Post-Secondary Liaison at CPHR Alberta. I've been working for the association for now 3 years, and my role at the association involves being your post-secondary contact. I want to welcome everyone here today at the Dhillon School of Business HR Industry Evening event and give a thank you to our presenter, Chris Broughton, for taking the time out of your schedule to share your knowledge and expertise with the next generation of HR and business professionals. Thank you. I'd also like to bring greetings from our association, CPHR Alberta. We're a 6,000 strong association, and we work to raise the standards of HR in Alberta and provide the tools and resources to help our members to advance their careers at every stage of their careers. So for professionals looking into moving from management for the first time, or for the new graduate just starting out their career, we're developing programs and events to help along you to the path of success. I've had the opportunity to attend and speak at a couple of industry evening events for the Dhillon School of Business. However, this is very unique and one of a kind, as it's not an in-person event. For some of you, this may be your first virtual networking event, so welcome. I'd like to take some time to talk about the importance of networking and building and maintaining your network at this time. As this event is a networking and learning opportunity between students, industry professionals, and community, I'd like to talk about the importance of networking and maintaining your network during the pandemic. In-person coffee meetings and informational interviews have now transitioned onto virtual platforms. What does this mean and why is this so important? It's important for students and new grads to successfully transition to networking online to stay ahead of the curve and graduate with a well-defined network. I know the value of a strong network, but I believe it's not just about landing your next role. Something I want to stress to all of you about your online networks is that there's no prize at having 1,000 LinkedIn connections or 10,000 or 100,000. Your online networks will be most valuable when you know that each other and your connection is one that you can help or turn to for getting help. It's really about quality over quantity, so be mindful about how you grow this network too. I'm going to give you a secret. Business professionals like to talk about themselves. If you approach someone in a virtual setting or breakout room, tell them you're a student and ask them how they got started in your career. You're going to get the conversation started. Networking is an activity that you've probably already heard of in most of your classes. Dhillon School of Business does an excellent job of encouraging students to grow their network through events like this one, or through student clubs, and even through your group assignments in your classes. The biggest reason I've heard the importance of networking is to help you find a job, and that's true. CPHR Alberta hosts many events in a year, and many of them are free and virtually held for our members, so that HR pros that are looking for a new role can virtually meet the people looking for new talent. In June, we held a 4-part webinar series on career exploration and job search techniques. This series was a valuable opportunity for anyone looking to transition to a new role, implementing a job search plan, and applying for jobs on virtual platforms and interviewing in a virtual world. We capped this series off with the virtual industry afternoon with industry professionals and members who want to network and know more about a specific area in HR, for instance, labor relations or recruitment and selection. We had 18 industry professionals in 8 competency areas of HR. We're doing something similar like this in November as well for HR students that are members of CPHR Alberta. Whether it's your social media network like LinkedIn or a virtual room of professionals, a healthy professional network can make your career search easier. We offer some virtual one-on-one options too. So our mentoring program matches a mentor and a protege for a 6-month term. It's a very popular program. Often these pairings will repeat themselves for another 6 months or a year. You end up with a new contact in your network who you can turn to for advice and feedback, and who can turn to you for providing advice and feedback as well. Applications for this program are now open. We also have our walk and talk program. So this is a unique program that matches student members up one-on-one with our senior HR leaders. It's a one-time virtual meeting that focuses on giving you the opportunity to connect with leaders in our profession. Our goal is not to encourage job pitches, but to let you ask the questions that you want to ask and hear some advice from industry leaders. So right now, student membership with CPHR Alberta is a budget-conscious step in the right direction. Right now, any new student member can pay $25 for the remainder of 2020 and access all the membership benefits. How does this promotion work? So you pay a $25 application fee for the remainder of 2020, and in January, you renew your membership for the 2021 calendar year by only paying your annual dues. And like Kelly was mentioning, for those that are enrolled in the accredited program, your dues will be $25. And for all other programs, it's $50. However, you don't have to be an HR student to be a member of CPHR Alberta. Our association is focused on helping our members succeed throughout their entire career. So thank you again for allowing me to speak here today. And I hope I get the chance to connect virtually with many of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby, and thank you to CPHR for your support. Students, so you know, those videos that Abby just referenced are actually available for you to see on our Moodle page, so do go check those out. But today, obviously, we're here to learn all about COVID. So we have Chris Broughton with us. Chris has focused his career working for organizations that want to invest in their people and has been fortunate to gain invaluable experience in many areas of these growing organizations. He has been working in the human resources profession for over 10 years. Chris attended both the Lethbridge College and the University of Lethbridge, earning a Bachelor of Management majoring in Human Resource and Labor Relations. He is currently a chartered professional in human resources, senior professional in human resources, and a certified professional investigator. Experience includes workplace investigations, collective bargaining, employee relations, health and safety, and policy and procedure. Chris is proud to call Southern Alberta home, surrounded by a strong business community and full of entrepreneurial spirit. And with that, I'm going to pass the screen over to Chris Broughton to tell us all about human resources in a COVID world. And I'll just add, for anybody that does have questions as the presentation is going on, do remember that you are putting those into the chat box and sending them to me, Heather Hardy. Chris, the screen is yours.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. And appreciate everyone joining us tonight for this conversation here. I was actually slated to speak to the university back in March on workplace investigations, but unfortunately because of COVID, that got derailed. So I think it's kind of poetic that I'm here actually talking about COVID. So I appreciate the invitation from the university to come speak about this. I see lots of familiar names in the participant box, so it's great to see those names, and hopefully we get to connect sometime soon, hopefully in person. So with that, I'd like to just begin the presentation a little bit here. So as Heather mentioned, my presentation tonight is on HR in a COVID world. Again, this is something that is constantly evolving, and as we, as a profession, adapt to the changes, I just want to maybe bring to light some of my observations and kind of maybe some of the things that I've predict will kind of happen with our profession in the future. So as Heather mentioned, my name is Chris Broughton. I am the founder and HR consultant with UpSourced HR. We provide outsourced HR support services for primarily small and medium-sized businesses, focused mostly in Western Canada. I'm also a CPHR, so again, thank you, Abby, and CPHR for their support. And I'm also a U of L alumnus. I actually was president of the Management Student Society at one point, and one of our main focuses was on professional development. So I'm really excited to see and happy to see that the organization and the school is really moving towards expanding the learning outside of the classroom. So these are great events, and I really look forward to participating, especially in this HR industry evening every year. So some of my clients are in the manufacturing, government, retail, education, agriculture, real estate, medical services, professional services, construction, aerospace, a wide variety of different industries. And so my experience talking tonight is really about a wide variety of these industries and getting a unique perspective from all kind of different areas within the economy. So to start off, I guess what am I seeing as far as organizations and how they're having to adapt in this climate? One of the big things I'm noticing and hearing from a lot of business owners and senior managers is that the 5-year plans that they had in place are now gone. Organizations are now focused on their 6-month to 1-year plans, and they're looking further down the road at that 10-year mark. The reality is a lot of organizations don't know what the next year or two is going to hold, or what's going to happen. And so really they're really focused on those kind of those short-term goals and what those long-term goals are. And I think that's important for us to know as we're starting to either enter the workforce or as industry leaders, focusing on kind of what we have control over with what we have right now as far as a climate, as well as what is going to happen further down the road in the 10 years and where we'd like to be. There's a lot of uncertainty around government programs. So every day there's some change to some sort of government program. I know in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, I was I spent many hours and late nights trying to keep up with the changes, creating blog posts and information for my clients, only to find out the next day that that entire program was scrapped. So a lot of different changes were occurring. A lot of organizations are playing the wait and see approach. They're taking a look at what's currently happening. They're making their hiring decisions kind of on a day-by-day basis to see what's going to happen, and so it is going to impact graduates coming into the marketplace as far as kind of what these organizations will plan as far as their labor needs are. Workforce management and performance tracking. I've unfortunately dealt with a couple of clients recently who have implemented performance tracking measures into their organizations. So realistically, they're looking at artificial intelligence to help monitor their employees' productivity and behaviors while they're working from home, as well as just overall workforce management and how do we engage those workplaces. There's a lot of COVID fatigue, and I'll be honest, I'm one of them, getting sick and tired of hearing this on a day-to-day basis. But I think it's important for us to realize that this is not going away anytime soon, and that we need to remain focused on, as business leaders, on what we can do about it. There's a lot of misinformation out there as well, as I'm sure we're all encountering. Social media feeds are full of misinformation and quote unquote fake news. With regards to COVID. And so it's important that, organizations are taking the steps to look at, what the official sources are stating, as well as look at, studies that are coming out of some institutions and that we can rely on. I'm also seeing a lot of innovation from organizations, resilience, collaboration, community support. I mean, it's amazing to see when I talk to these, the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, for example, and seeing all the good work that, that type of organization is putting forward, how organizations have had to pivot from a brick and mortar store to online sales in basically overnight. We're seeing a lot of that happening, and it's a really great opportunity for people to think outside the box about how their business models can change. And I think it's a really great environment to be in right now as far as that is concerned, and just the innovation that we're seeing in business. So how some of the organizations or workplaces have had to adapt. Obviously, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, for example, Google Meet, we've all had to become experts in a lot of these different areas overnight. There's a lot of new training systems, managing remotely. Organizations are having to do pre-screens, safety programs, personal protective equipment, return to work programs. Again, all of these different things that organizations are now having to adapt to, and really trying to kind of figure it out as they go along. There really isn't any type of great planning that can happen with a lot of these things. It's really just winging it, for example, and really just kind of seeing how things are progressing. So it's, like I said, it's great to see how some of these organizations are being able to adapt to this environment. Certainly the costs, both from an employee's perspective. So how do we make sure that we can continue to employ individuals with a decreased revenue, as well as how much does it cost to continue to operate? And so organizations are having to balance, okay, the profitability of the organization, as well as just the employee well-being overall, and how long can we continue to support the numbers of employees that we do have. Recruitment and onboarding obviously have had to adapt to remote onboarding, remote interviewing. This is it's an interesting time. We have, as an organization, video conferencing interviews have certainly happened in the past, certainly not to the extent that they are now. And so it's really great to see the progressive nature of this type of initiatives within organizations. Obviously, communication is a big one, and so really a lot of the time, when we're looking at communication, we're looking at a lot of nonverbal communication, and so really doing that over the phone or even over video conference isn't always the best approach. And so we've had to look at ways to adapt and change as organizations to increase and improve communication when we're not able to meet face to face. As well as mental health supports. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns around mental health and how this is going to impact a variety of different organizations in the future, and making sure that our employees are supported in ways that we can. And this is something that I know as HR professionals, I've spoken to a number of them. As HR professionals, we're undergoing the same amount of mental health issues, as well as questions about will I have a job next week, as many of these employees, and yet we're having to put on a brave face for a lot of these employees and continue to support them while again experiencing the same anxiety that a lot of these employees have as well. So moving into what will the future, or what will the workplace of the future look like? I kind of have a question I'd like to pose to the audience. Where there's a poll feature here, but what kind of work environment do you see or do you anticipate in the future? Do you anticipate a return to normal, working remotely, or more of a blended option? Just give it a couple seconds for the votes to come in here. Perfect. So yeah, the vast majority of individuals have indicated a blended. So 89% of people believe that we'll look at more of a blended option, and I think that's kind of the reality. I know a lot of organizations are moving towards fully remote, and a lot of IT-based organizations have moved in that direction, or at least indicated for the short term that is their plan until at least summer of 2021. I know Google, Facebook, Twitter, I believe, have all moved in that direction. So. But really, I do think that the future of it is more of a blended workplace. And it's interesting because in the past, when you would bring up the idea of a blended workplace and having options to work from home, many of the organizations that I've worked with had the belief that workers can't work from home. We need to continue to have them in place, and yet that entire mentality has had to shift overnight. Organizations that have been more traditional in their approach have really started to embrace that blended workplace as well. Organizations will also have to rethink their space needs. There's going to be more of a thoughtful space design. One of my clients is in the real estate field and is a property developer in commercial space. And what he's indicated to me is that organizations in the past have had 5,000 square feet of office space, have approached this individual with actually reducing that and cutting it in half to about 2,500 square feet. They'll be paying the same amount, but the actual space design is going to be more focused on things like creativity-based design to the actual workspace. So more collaboration, more breakout rooms, less cubicles, less offices, and more spaces where people are actually collaborating together, and then working from home, and then bringing them back together when they need to work on some of those collaborative projects. So very similar to what you'd likely see in a university environment, at least my university experience. Going to the library and people working together within their within some of those breakout rooms, and then going home to work on their own projects individually. So that's what we do kind of anticipate, a little bit more of a shift in organizations looking at that. So some of the pros and cons about the remote work environment. Some of the pros, obviously, we're looking at cost savings on rent for organizations, possible cost savings on wages. And what I mean by that is that organizations have indicated recently that they're going to be increasing their ability to work from home. And so they're able to, rather than have somebody centrally located in Lethbridge, for example, and I need to have that person in Lethbridge, I'm able to now go, worldwide or outside of, or across Canada rather, to now look for talent across that way. So we may be able to access talent, and we may be able to look at compensating individuals on different in different ways throughout that. Obviously, this will increase our availability of skill sets likely, and so I think the remote work option is going to be a fantastic idea and fantastic advantage for a lot of organizations that are able to employ some of those remote workers. There's also been studies done about the possibility of increased job satisfaction and productivity with remote work. Certainly, that's something that it's very, very dependent on the job as well as the individual. Some of the cons, again, possibly lower work productivity, depending on what that individual is capable of doing. Increased risk of burnout. So a lot of the individuals and organizations I've talked to, and individuals within those organizations have indicated their actual work day has increased. So because they can basically walk into their home office and start working, it's very hard to distinguish between their home life and their work life. And so what I fear is that organizations are going to start to rely, and employees are going to be constantly connected to the workplace. So we do have the increased risk of burnout in that chance there. There's a lower chance of what we call accidental collisions. So those accidental collisions are things where you're walking down, walking down the hallway, you run into someone, and you start talking about what you're doing. Next thing you know, the two of you are working on a project together, and sharing ideas about what's happened there. Obviously, the con or a risk of that remote work is that those type of accidental collisions won't happen. And organizations over the past number of years have identified that some of their best ideas come from this type of interaction. And organizations, Google, for example, have really modeled a lot of their campuses around increasing some of these accidental collisions. And so without that possibility, organizations will have to take a look at other options for that. The work from home option is sometimes great for some of the routine work that may happen, but as far as the creative work, we may see disadvantages to that as well. Decreased engagement. So again, if someone isn't connected to the office, to an actual physical space, we could see decreased engagement because of that, as well as some of the safety risks of working from home. So an organization has very much a stronger control of some of the safety risks in an actual workplace. At home, they don't have that same type of control. And so individuals may be working in places that are not ergonomically correct. So we may see an increase in the number of WCB claims for, could be repetitive strain injuries and things of that nature. And so that could be another con to some of to the remote work. So what will kind of the future of these workplaces look like? Again, to mention there, blended workspaces. Obviously, the increased use of technology. I think most of us have become quite accustomed to meeting in these type of environments. And as Avi mentioned earlier about networking, I think this is going to become a really big part of networking in the future is meeting remotely. And so the adoption of this is going to be it's going to be hard to move away from in the future. And so the increased use of technology is something that will be apparent in there. Reduced or completely eliminated travel. Organizations have now found that, people can do a lot of the work that they've done in the past. They can do that from afar. And so, in the past when I myself was having to travel to various locations, I may not have to do that in the future, which again increases the amount of time that I'm able to put forward towards projects rather than sitting in an airplane or driving in a car. So we actually could see increased productivity because of that. Again, moving towards more of an online training model. So obviously the university moving towards the online training and adopting that is big, but obviously organizations will have to adopt that as well. And that will become more and more apparent in organizations in the future. And again, as Evie mentioned there, the mentorship, I believe that's going to become more apparent as well, and doing some of the remote mentorship. Organizations will need to continue to develop talent. And I think the mentorship programs and connecting some senior leaders within organizations with some junior members is going to become, again, more of a focus for these organizations in the future. And lastly, artificial intelligence. So organizations are starting to use AI more so, and I think because of the remote work, organizations are going to be looking at how can we engage or monitor engagement of employees, as well as, again, productivity monitoring through the use of AI. And so we're going to continue to use and develop that in organizations. There'll be less of a focus more on roles per se, and I think there's going to be more focus on skills. So in the past, organizations were very much focused on, someone has a team lead title, someone has a supervisor title, a manager title, a director title. I think titles will start to move away somewhat, and they'll be focused more on skills and who possesses the skills and at what level those skills will be at. Organizations will be using software to track those skills and be able to assign projects to individuals that demonstrate those skills and put individuals together with those skills and build teams based on that as well. So that's kind of a prediction I have for these organizations. Again, it's less on roles and kind of more on the skills themselves. I do anticipate more of some gig and contract work. I myself am kind of a obviously in the consulting business, and I work a lot on different type of contract and gig type work. But as organizations have started to, really embrace the idea of having contract workers, I think we're going to see more and more of this type of work. So employees will be brought in for projects, and I think that's going to be more so some of the work that these organizations will be able to do in the future. So from an employee perspective, I think there'll be a great opportunity for you to work on projects you may not otherwise have had the opportunity to work on. And then from an employer perspective, you'll be able to pick some of the best talent, rather than having necessarily to continue to develop that talent internally. You'll be able to pick and choose who some of the contract workers that you'll be able to bring on. So I think this is a great opportunity for individuals entering the workforce to really develop some of the skill sets that way. The world is obviously is connected more than ever before, and so really the opportunities for individuals are really endless. I think, as I mentioned, the ability or the option of working from home and working remotely, the option for developing skills and taking on projects from organizations kind of outside of your geographical region, I think will be an option that maybe wouldn't have been otherwise available even a year ago. And it's because organizations have now had the ability to really test things out a little bit in the work from home model and have seen the value of doing that. So what about some of the employees? What do we think some of the skill sets are and competencies? I've got another poll question here for the group about what some of the skill sets or competencies do you think are going to be most important? So the question, what do you think will be the most important competency for employees in the future? Perfect. So a majority of individuals have talked about agility and adaptability, and really, I mean, these are all great options for it. But yeah, no, agility and communication I think are great answers, and really the key to kind of what organizations should be looking for. So what I anticipate the employees of the future as having strong skill sets in is agile and adaptable. Organizations have obviously had to, and employees have had to switch from being in the office to working from home, to some coming back to the office, to working from home and back and forth. You need to be adaptable, and employees that I've seen that have struggled with that, are really again struggling just meeting the work and performance demands. Employees that have really adopted that and have been able to adapt to the new working environment have really flourished in that. And again, organizations will be looking for individuals that can demonstrate that competency. Strong communicators, again, if you're able to communicate through video conference, again through instant messaging, through email, that'll be very, very important. I've seen a lot of struggles, especially over the last couple of months, with individuals that have struggled with communication, and so working with them to improve that competency has resulted in great in improvement in their work performance. But again, organizations will be looking for individuals that possess that competency. They'll need to be independent, so they'll need to show that they can work without having someone monitoring their behavior on a daily basis. Sometimes with remote employees, we may not speak to them for a week or two. And we need to understand that they'll have, first of all, the ability to continue working on their own, but also the ability to put their hand up and ask for assistance when it's needed. They'll also need to be a team player. So again, connecting with individuals on the team, building those relationships, and then ensuring that everyone on the team is contributing to that. And lastly, kind of disciplined. So again, being able to focus on tasks and get them completed in obviously within the time period. And so the freedom of remote work is often tempting, and I've succumbed to that myself once or twice when you're just thinking, maybe I don't want to work this afternoon. Employees will need to be disciplined to continue to make sure that the projects can get completed on time. Bonus, diversity and inclusiveness. So obviously with the Black Lives Matter movements that we're starting to see, this will be a competency that individuals will need to adapt to and really embrace. And I don't know whether or not I would consider that to be more of a competency or basically a trait that individuals are willing to, like I said, embrace within the workplace. So organizations themselves, the culture is changing towards breaking down the barriers and being more of an inclusive workplace. So again, that's something that individuals will have to be able to demonstrate. Culture is more important than ever. This is a statement that I've been looking at, and did a recent conversation with ATB about how culture themselves, we need to make sure that that individuals possess the culture fit for the organization. In the past, if an individual came into an organization, into the physical space, we could get them indoctrinated essentially into the culture of the organization, but we won't necessarily have that same opportunity in the future. And so finding individuals that are the right fit, at the very beginning is going to help push forward the objectives of the organization. And so that's going to, I think, more important than ever, that organizations are looking for individuals that really do possess the culture and embrace the culture really more than ever. So just want to touch base on kind of what I think is in store for the actual profession, the HR profession in general. So over the past 6 months, the HR professionals that I've spoken to, and including myself, have had to really, really develop skill sets that normally would have taken us probably years to develop, and training in developing the training for these type of skill sets. We've had to really kind of learn overnight, and that includes kind of facilitating work from home. So any of the organizations I've worked for in the past have never really done any type of work from home. And so we've really had to become experts in how to, first of all, facilitate that and ensure that, again, employees have what they need to succeed in their jobs. A lot of us have had to become mental health experts on how to recognize signs of anxiety, depression, decreased engagement, and how to help the employees get the supports that they need. Workforce management, again, how to engage our remote workforce. We've had to become COVID experts. I probably have spent more time learning about the virus than I have with any type of workplace hazard that I've ever had to learn about. And so we've really had to become, experts as the organization is relying on a lot of the HR and health and safety providers to really understand, the virus and what kind of impact it could have in the workplace. As I mentioned before, government benefit programs, that's something that we've all had to really learn more and more about. I probably know more about the EI program than I care to know about at this point. But again, it's something that we've had to learn in a very, very quick time. And as I mentioned before, how to conduct remote interviews as well as investigations. So as Heather mentioned before, I'm a certified professional investigator in the province of Alberta. Normally, these type of investigations would happen face-to-face, where I can help gauge or use body language of individuals to gauge their credibility. I'm not able to do that anymore. And so I've had to really, as an investigator, learn how to change my own practices to really help guide those investigations. There's also been obviously an accelerated technology adoption. So HR professionals are really having to become experts in a lot of things, whether it be their HRMS or HRIS systems, if they're using any type of artificial systems or putting those in place. We've really had to increase that technology adoption. And I think our profession is going to increase that, and organizations are going to lean on the HR professionals within those organizations to really kind of push forward and drive a lot of the productivity initiatives. And obviously that'll have to be done through technology. And so we're gonna have to become experts in a lot of these different areas. So some of the skill sets that I think that HR professionals will need to learn, and as students, I'd be looking for opportunities to help develop these skills. HR analytics, and I know different institutions are implementing these courses into their curriculum, and I would highly recommend that individuals take these courses. Technology overall. I have a minor background in technology and did it for a couple of years with an organization, and really it served me well in helping to assist the various organizations in rolling out some of these things. And so I think it's important that HR professionals have at least a base knowledge of how some of these systems work. As I mentioned earlier, adaptability, they're going to have to also have creativity. So thinking outside the box on some of the solutions that they're providing for their organizations they're working for. And again, as I mentioned before, communication is going to be a big one. The profession is also going to see a lot of changes when it comes to, as I mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence, chatbots. It's going to become very, very important as well. The employee self-service is an option that obviously organizations are in the past have relied on HR professionals, and more that employees are relying on the employee self-service option, which is again freeing up HR professionals to focus on other strategic initiatives. There's also the legal profession. HR professionals have often been asked questions about terminations, about the employment standards legislation. We're starting to see artificial intelligence move into the legal field itself, and it's actually assisting HR professionals in a lot of ways. I myself subscribe to an artificial intelligence software that allows me to help predict some of the reasonable notice periods and things like that, that in the past I'd have to consult with a lawyer on. So these are all things that we're starting to see in the development of the automation and artificial intelligence. So some of the functions that are less susceptible to the automation. So again, I would try to focus on some of these functions and skill developments. So this came from a study from KPMG in 2018. So people performance whole system architecture, if you're unfamiliar with that, I'd look up that system. HR and business strategy, organizational effectiveness, change management, and employee relations. What they've determined is that these are the less likely to be or impacted by automation and technology. And so these are some of the skill developments that we as HR professionals can develop to help future-proof ourselves and continue with employment. So how can you prepare? Look for opportunities to develop new skills. Think outside the box. What skills make you more valuable to organizations? Networking is obviously more difficult, but just as important, as Avi mentioned. So networking is really, really important, and having a strong network is really, really valuable. I encourage individuals to utilize technology. Obviously, LinkedIn. I think there's been an increase in adoption of LinkedIn as a tool. I myself have really relied on LinkedIn to connect with other HR professionals. Professional associations, I'd encourage individuals and students to join CPHR. It's a great opportunity to network with a variety of different HR professionals and gain some great opportunities for educational programs. And as I mentioned before, mentorship programs. So that'll be a great opportunity for junior members and students to connect with some of the senior leaders as well. So I do want to make sure I have some time for questions. So I appreciate everyone's attendance today. Please, I really do enjoy connecting with both students and professionals. So I would encourage you to reach out, Chris at UpSourcedHR.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Chris Broughton 1. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much, Chris. Round of applause. I know you can't hear us all, but I'm sure there's thunderous applause coming from people's houses. That was terrific. I'll get you started off with a couple of questions. If anybody else has any questions, there's been many coming through the chat box, so please keep those coming. Make sure you're sending them directly to me. First question, though. Due to COVID, do you foresee hidden costs that both employers and employees are going to have to pay? I know you mentioned the ergonomics and those sorts of pieces that I'm sure are going to affect employers in the future, but are there other hidden costs that you can think of that are an implication that we might not be thinking of?
Well, certainly, likely what we'll see, I mentioned this earlier, the mental health aspect of it. We're likely going to see an increased amount of absenteeism. We're going to start to see increased use of some of the benefit programs. And so we will start to see those costs climb up as far as organizations are concerned. And so we will start to see maybe not so much of a hidden cost. I don't think it'll probably rear its ugly head at some point as far as how much is that going to cost organizations in the future. But as far as right now, like I said, I think what we're starting to see is absenteeism increase. as individuals are starting to get impacted, essentially, from a mental health perspective. I'm certainly not an accountant, and I certainly don't profess to be. So, there are implications, obviously, to working from home, and we can claim certain things on tax returns, but I will probably leave that to the professionals.
Awesome, good answer. Another question, you mentioned AI coming into the workplaces to help manage employees. What is sort of the fine line that companies have to walk for people's privacy and those pieces? Like, what does that look like from the employer's perspective?
It is a fine line. Again, anytime we're looking at a privacy, we have to be able to justify that invasion of privacy. There is still an expectation of privacy, especially on, even if it is a company-owned computer or even a personal device. There is, the courts have looked at what there is a certain level and an expectation of privacy on these devices. Individuals have to know that they're being monitored, how they're being monitored, and that organizations have to be very clear and open about that. And the invasion of privacy has to be for legitimate business reasons. And so we really just can't sit there and sit back and watch somebody's computer usage just because we're interested in what they're doing. And so it is a fine line, and really, I mean, these things have to be taken on a kind of a case-by-case basis for that. And that's where I really think that, AI is again, if it's designed appropriately, is indiscriminate. And so really it's looking at all employees, regardless of their background. Nobody can claim that they were being discriminated against because of any type of protected ground. And so again, the systems have to be developed with certainly privacy in mind, but also what kind of the intended purpose of that invasion of privacy is going to be.
Yeah, great. I totally agree with that. Next question. So you mentioned that you foresee a lot more of sort of the contract and gig work. Do you foresee in the future that's going to have an effect on how employees are compensated? Like, do you think that compensation is going to change from that annual payroll to more of a piecework or performance-based pay?
Yeah, I think obviously, a lot of organizations have looked at what that looks like. So we've got Skip the Dishes, Uber. People have become somewhat used to this gig type work. And granted, for better or worse. Obviously, there have been some absolute horror stories when it comes to some of the abuse of contract workers. But I think it's an opportunity for individuals, again, as I mentioned, to develop those skill sets. My guess is that, again, a lot of it will be project-based work. So they'll be compensated for that. There'll be likely a negotiated wage rate. Here's the anticipated hours for that, and they'll be able to go in and conduct that work and get that project, whatever it might be, accomplished, and then move on to the next project. So I anticipate, I certainly don't anticipate this very wide adoption of this, but I think that there will be an increase in opportunities for individuals in that contract work sector. And so obviously it would change from an annual salary to kind of that piecework or some of those short-term projects.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned earlier the pros and cons of working remotely. Can you tell us a little bit more about the impact that might have on employer benefits such as health and dental? As in, do you think that the compensation plan for employees will drastically change in the coming future?
Yeah, it's interesting. Previously, organizations, especially over the last couple of years, have really tried to promote good working environments through things like, at-work gyms, cafeterias, a variety of those things. Obviously, an employer can't go in and hire a personal chef for every employee working at home, or buy maybe a treadmill for every employee. But certainly, I think that the benefits will, obviously change. There'll probably be a reduced spending on some of those areas. But as I mentioned, I think, with those blended workspaces, there'll still be the opportunity for employees to come in and maybe access those benefits. There's some great projects here downtown Lethbridge where organizations are moving into some spaces where they'll have access to communal kitchens, rooftop patios, those type of things that, again, organizations may not have had access to before, but they're now having access to when employees want to engage those options or those perks, essentially. But then other times they're sitting at home. So I think as overall, again, I think the spending on some of the benefits will change to obviously support workers working from home, but I don't see it maybe from a health and dental perspective. I think those will kind of remain the same in that regard.
Well, that's great. Great insight. A question back to your example with ATB. So you'd mentioned they're obviously a company that has a really strong culture. Lots of other companies do as well. What is your recommendation for those employers who are bringing on new hirees who aren't going to necessarily be part of that physical culture? Like, how do they help integrate that culture in this remote environment?
Yeah, so I think it's both an employer responsibility as well as an employee responsibility. It's got to be that mutual effort. If employees are sitting at home waiting for their employer to engage them, it likely won't turn out well. As well as the employer needs to ensure that they're looking at how to engage those employees. And a variety of different ways. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with the artificial intelligence, organizations are looking at things like, how long is someone spending on a particular email, or how many keystrokes do they have in a day, and they're when are they logging in, or when are they logging out? How often are they using instant messaging? And they're really using that to help try to gauge how engaged an employee is with that workplace. And so somebody who might have higher instant messaging use is obviously reaching out to colleagues in the workplace. And so they might have an increased use of engagement in that. As far as the culture is concerned, I think organizations will continue to use, maybe not in the short term, but obviously in the future, when we can return to some sort of in-person group meetings, where we can have these culture development days. And so really the focus isn't necessarily going to be on bringing the team together so we can work on something. It's going to be continue to develop on culture. And that's really the sole focus of it. So whether it's, maybe a value statement, something about honesty. Well, what can we do to promote that type of value within the organization and again, promote that as a value within our culture? So where we can develop, a workshop surrounding that particular value. So that's kind of where I see organizations having to adopt some of those different days or workshops, retreats, whatever it might be, solely focused on that type of initiative.
Well, that's interesting. I like that. Culture day. That's quite a change. Looking from the student perspective, how do you foresee HR jobs in the industry changing? Do you see some are going to become irrelevant due to the virtual climate? Are there going to be new ones that are popping up that maybe didn't exist before?
Yeah, great question. As I mentioned, I think that there's been a trend within the HR profession towards automation. And so some of the entry-level roles that were there in the past may start to disappear. But that's going to open up, I think, other opportunities for individuals. As I said, the HR technology side of things, I think will continue to evolve as organizations. Communication, learning and development, I think is a great opportunity for HR professionals. Having to learn how to increase the use of technology in these organizations, and how we can embrace these type of environments within organizations. So I think students will certainly, new graduates will have a great perspective on how that's worked for them in a university environment, and how they can bring that experience to workplaces. And so we will see a shift as, like I said, as automation starts to remove some of the more administrative tasks of HR. But I think, again, as we move, we're going to start to take a look at strategy and communication, some of the things that, again, computers just can't do. So that's where I see the shift happening.
Yeah, that's great. This question actually is a really good follow-up on that. Do you foresee virtual taking the human aspect out of human resources, and how can we combat that?
Do I see technology taking the human out of human resources? Obviously, to a certain extent. I mean, we are animals. We do thrive on personal connections, on physical connections with individuals. we won't have that same connection in a virtual environment. So we will have that disconnect. Organizations, again, will have to, I believe, move, and embrace that blended workspace in order to make sure that we as individuals and humans can still maintain that group connection, and having that ability to actually physically connect with one another. And so that's kind of where I see organizations will have to certainly move in that direction.
Great. All right. I think in the interest of time, we've got lots of questions coming in. I'll ask one more question. From there, we will be breaking off into the networking breakout room. So there's going to be a huge opportunity to answer and ask more questions. Then Chris has said he's going to pop into different rooms, so everybody will have a chance to ask some more questions. But last question here. Do you see an increase in the use of more HR consulting firms and less in business HR departments in the upcoming future?
My business is focused on that, and outsourcing those functions. I think that the use of contractors, consultants have now become more mainstream than they have in the past. Organizations are looking at things like fractional leadership. And so you can hire a CFO, a fractional CFO, a financial officer. You can hire marketing officers on a fractional basis. You can hire HR professionals on a fractional basis. And really, I do see organizations that, in the past, really haven't had the budget for a full-time HR professional, really embracing. And I have many clients that's really, the sole reason we're working together is because they have the need for it. But they don't necessarily have the budget for full-time staff. And so they're really able to access professionals like myself to come in and work with their businesses, help them grow their businesses on that fractional basis. So yes, I do see an increase in that. I certainly hope that there's an increase in that as well, obviously from my business perspective. So
awesome. That's great. And I lied. I've got one more question I have to ask, Chris. Everybody needs to know this one. Looking at the skill set that's required for like students entering the workforce, what would you say is like a minimum skill set requirement for students, like skills they need to have before entering the workforce, and maybe some development they need to think about getting?
Well, this is probably a bad answer for you, but as far as skills concerned, personally, I like to hire for attitude more than anything. And attitude, I think, can be displayed in a variety of ways, but things like being adaptable and the skill sets like that. So, but if somebody is willing to learn, I can train, for the most part, most people on pretty much anything. And really, they have to have that willingness to learn. So maybe that would be that competency and something that they can demonstrate, is they're not only willing to learn, but have demonstrated that they've had an interest in something, and they can maybe even do self-directed learning, and really kind of take things outside of maybe showing that initiative to learn something. And I think that's something that for me, I really, I really value when I'm looking at hiring decisions, is somebody who really kind of displays those skill sets.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Chris. We threw a whole wide breadth of questions at you there. So thank you so much for that. Your answers are really helpful. I hope everybody benefited from all of that as well, your presentation. Thank you so much. From here, everybody, you are going to be popping into breakout rooms. So we're going to have, I believe, 4 rooms of networking. So Tony, my IT specialist, is going to help me out here. He's going to pop everybody into those rooms. You'll be in there for 30 minutes networking. If you're thinking, hey, I don't know what to ask, refer back to that email. I sent out some questions that might help to get you started. But from here, you'll pop into those rooms. You'll be in there for 30 minutes networking, and then we'll bring everybody back for a final conclusion. So Tony, I'll give it to you.
All right. I've already sent out the request for people to join into a variety of rooms.
Hopefully networking was fun. That was our first attempt at doing that as well. So I hope that everybody had a good time and that there were some really good conversations. I popped around and checked out what everybody was talking about, and it seemed to feel like everybody was communicating, so that made me happy. Thank you all so much. I was just saying that is the first time we've tried doing breakout rooms, and I popped around. It looked like everybody was having some really good conversations. So thank you all so much for sticking around for that element. I know it's not quite the same as when you can walk around the room and shake somebody's hand and really meet them, but I hope that everybody was able to have some good conversation. Chris, thank you so much for that enlightening keynote presentation. Lots of great information was shared there. I know that COVID is something that's obviously having extreme impact in all areas of industry right now, and it definitely helps to get some insight, especially for those students who I know are curiously wondering, once I graduate, what does this mean for me? So that was definitely helpful. I hope that industry as well were able to get some tips out of that they can take back to their own companies. As well, thank you so much to Abby at CPHR. For the industry who weren't a part of it, Abby actually did a 30-minute information session with our students prior to the keynote presentation. So students, I hope that you got a lot out of that, and we're so grateful that CPHR was willing to help out and do that. But thank you all so much for coming today. This was our Human Resources Industry Evening. We have many more events like this coming down the pipe, as well as workshops and different opportunities for our students to develop beyond the classroom. Our DSP link, or Student Professional Development, whichever one you're calling it right now, we're morphing into that DSP link. It is really all about helping our students to develop beyond the classroom, get new information, and develop new skills. So I hope that everybody found this to be extremely beneficial. Do keep looking forward to more opportunities that will be promoted in the future. Expect a survey coming out to your email tomorrow where you can give us some feedback. In this environment, we're definitely looking for that feedback to help us to pivot, learn, and grow as well. So please take the time to do that. But that concludes today's event. Thank you all so much for coming. And Chris, thank you again for being with us and giving us all of that information today. So have a good night, everyone.